This is an RNZ podcast.
Hayden Donnell on Sunday and in Midweek Mediawatch last week, we covered, and you covered on Sunday, the political and media kerfuffle over Andrea Vance using the C word in a column for the Post, and there has been an update on this story, Hayden.
Yes, Andrea Vance has written a follow-up column to her controversial first column, and this one's headlined, "I said what I said, and I'm sorry, ... sort of." And you know, Emil, I'm not a psychiatrist, but I don't think that she is actually sorry.
So this is the sorry, not sorry that, well, perhaps ironically, the sorry, not sorry that politicians occasionally give that so frustrates journalists.
Exactly. Except for this time, it's more of a sorry of disappointment at you. It says, "I'm actually sorry that politicians and the media have spent the last week focusing on my potty mouth." This is her speaking in first person here, not mine, not Hayden Donnell's, and not the terrible injustice that is being done to care workers, nurses, teachers, and other underpaid women.
Wow. Yeah, which is something.
Yeah, so less of an apology than an accusation, really, isn't it? She accuses these politicians of feigning outrage about her language to take the heat off them and their decision to put a halt to a planned pay rise for thousands of women. And incidentally, actually, an up-and-coming Mediawatch producer named, me, made this point actually on Sunday as well.
Yeah,
so listen to that show.
You phrased it nicely. You called it the dead cat strategy.
The dead cat. This is something that was coined by Boris Johnson in a column, I think, and he was quoting something that someone else had told him. They said, if you're in trouble about something, just throw a dead cat on the table. Pretty soon everyone will have forgotten what you're in trouble for, and they'll start discussing the dead cat. So Vance is pretty adamant that what's happening here is dead catting. That's the verb.
Dead catting, right?
So the political verb for this is dead catting. You're in trouble. Oh my gosh, let's throw something else on the table, and that'll change the narrative. Everyone will be talking about that instead. So she is basically saying this is all a charade. This was actually her word, and actually they were just trying to take the heat off themselves that they were getting for their decision to put a halt to pay equity claims.
Right. Okay. Wow. Which is something that I know we covered this last week, and a lot of people texted in thoughts to that effect as well. She did spend quite a long time defending that column and this alleged apology. Yes,
and just some of the criticism, she addressed them. She said a lot of it was sarcastic. This is actually quite right. A lot of the column is quite sarcastic, and I think probably some of the criticism deliberately shared it of its sarcastic context and made it out as if it was all completely serious. So, for instance, girl math. She talked about this is the girl math budget. She thought that was being misread, that she wasn't actually engaging in a sexist stereotype there. She was trying to subvert that sexist stereotype about girl math and girls not being able to do maths to talk about how this budget was actually screwing over low-paid women. And this is another, maybe it seems like a small thing, but throughout the week, it was said that she had called these female MPs the C word in her original column. She actually said that they were acting like a C word. And I know that might not seem like that much of a distinction, but I do feel like it is quite different to be called that as if it's your person and to have your actions described that way.
It's a little bit different.
It is a little bit different. I personally I'm one of the people that said that she'd called them the C word. So I'm as guilty as anyone else. I probably did it for effect and maybe because I thought there was a bit of comic value in it when I was writing for the spin-off.
She had some harsh words for the media as well.
Yes, she said, this is her quote, "You do have to marvel at a political class and media ecosystem that reacts more viscerally to a four-letter word than to the actual structural inequality it was being used to highlight."
Interesting point. Interesting angle.
And do you think that is fair enough?
Well, maybe. I don't know. It's certainly, the use of that word and discussions around its appropriateness certainly exploded in the immediate aftermath. And I did get a lot of texts into this program, and I know other programs did as well, which said, what a masterful distraction tactic this is, because now people aren't talking about these pay equity claims and this, in the eyes of these correspondents, abusive process. They're talking about the appropriateness of the C word.
And maybe because it is such a visceral word, it was easy to subvert the narrative in that way, but it was still remarkable quite how easy it was.
Yeah.
That everyone started discussing whether this was appropriate or not. And we really got sidetracked into this discussion about gendered language, which is arguably less important than the discussion about gendered wage differences.
Do you think, though, that maybe it was like a Streisand effect kind of thing, that after the furore around the use of the C word had died down, there was increased attention on the broader issue? It's not like nobody was talking about pay equity and what had happened in this area beforehand or since.
No, and I do wonder, there was an initial burst of anger about the move, and there was a lot of coverage there, and maybe the media was looking for something to move on to, and actually people like Nicola Willis and Brooke Van Velden bringing up this column was welcome for the media in that way because it gave the story extra legs. But I think that the media, I speak as if there is a behemoth called the media, but I think news organisations probably should reflect just how easy it was to throw this out there, to make a big kind of PR push or song and dance about this particular issue, and to really throw what was actually quite dogged and persistent coverage of an issue, to throw it off course within the matter of a day. You had news bulletins that were coming out, and Simon Dello was saying to Mikey Sherman, this story isn't going away. And Mikey Sherman would say, no, it's not going away. Sam Hayes, the same thing. It was almost a jinx situation. Say, jinx, Lloyd Burr, this isn't going away. No, Sam, this isn't going away. Next day, well, we're talking about the C word instead. Stuff
is a part of the media. Andrea Vance is part of the media. If this criticism is being levelled at the media, can it not be levelled at them as well, that they could have anticipated that this would be the effect of using that word in that way?
This is probably what Andrea Vance is actually saying sorry for,
right?
in her column this week, that yes, she regrets using the word because of how easy it made it to divert the narrative away from these women. But there's also an element of disappointment as well there about her colleagues being so easy to distract. I haven't done an extensive audit of all Stuff's coverage. I don't know whether they're just as guilty as anyone else. I suspect that they probably did do a bunch of Seagate coverage. I don't know how to say it, but
well,
yes.
I mean, speaking of the media taking heat, this very segment has taken some heat from the media about its coverage of this issue.
That's right. You're going to feel it now, Emil Donovan. Gordon Campbell over at Scoop and Werewolf, he had some barbs for two what he called Victorian gentlemen on RNZ who broke out the smelling salts last week over Andrea Vance's salty language. And look, they're not named in his column. Maybe too kind, Gordon. But I do believe he's referring there to Sir Colin Peacock and Mr. Emil Donovan on Midweek Mediawatch. And he said that, look, they were worrying about her using extreme language to express her opinions, and that she had different options, and maybe that was... he's saying that you were focusing too much on the language rather than the actual facts of what's going on with pay equity.
What did you make of that critique of Midweek Mediawatch last week?
Well, I kind of think they have a point in that, yes, maybe we did focus on the language a little bit too much. Of course, this is a media show, so you talk about the media issue more than necessarily the wider issue of pay equity. That is for the news reporters, and Andrea Vance was the media angle in this. So I get that, guys. But you're right. Is it the real important discussion to be having, whether this was an appropriate word to be using in a newspaper column? Is there more appropriate word? Is there more important discussions to be had? Still, you're probably right. The substantive point that Colin was making is probably right. It probably would have been a little bit more wise to use a different word, because then I wouldn't be talking about it on Wednesday the following week and on the Sunday.
Although the piece might not have gone so far and wide.
Well, that's it as well. Maybe it was better read because of this. And it was interesting. Apparently, this is secondhand gossip repeated by Toby Manhire on the Gone by Lunchtime podcast today. He said apparently the original column was intended to be even stronger than it was, and it had some even saltier language and harsher turns of phrase. So it was actually what we got, what caused all this hubbub, was actually a toned down version.
Interesting episode of Gone by Lunchtime today, by the way.
You know what?
Robust exchange.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I haven't listened to all of it, Emil. I've just heard that bit. I've been pointed to it. I need to listen to it all.
It's an excellent episode. Yeah. I would urge people to listen to it after Nights is finished. All right, and amongst all of this, Hayden, the Voyager Media Awards were held, and they began with a reference to the controversy we were just talking about.
We just can't get away from it. Media and Communications Minister Paul Goldsmith made this nervous quip at the beginning of the night.
Been an interesting week in Parliament. I'm not sure I'm really up with the modern parlance of Parliament these days. The Prime Minister and Simeon Brown and me, when we use words like flip and when we're angry, flipping heck and things like that. But it's been a bit different down there. There's something definitely happening on next Tuesday. I don't know what it is. People keep saying, see you next Tuesday. I don't know what all that's about. The budget's on Thursday.
Now, for those not in the know, I'd forgotten this. See you next Tuesday is actually an acronym.
Yeah.
Emil, for something else. Another word beginning with C. Jeremy Corbett, the host on the night, though, critiqued Goldsmith's comedic chops there. He said, actually, Thursday, if you're talking about the budget, works just as well. Also begins with T.
Yeah. Interestingly, for the current climate, with regard to those awards, NZME picked up a lot of awards for coverage that was A, publicly funded, and B, about Māori.
And yes, in the current climate, pretty interesting. Their project Whenua won Best Innovation in Digital Storytelling. And if you haven't seen it, it's like a data tool, data visualization where it shows all the land that's been transferred out of Māori hands into Pākehā hands in the last 200 plus years. And you can sort by confiscations, crown purchases, you can type your street or your suburb in, you look at local area. And so it's pretty useful in that way, and it's a pretty striking in that way. You don't often see, while you might know, of course, that Māori have lost a lot of land, it's striking to see it represented visually. And the interesting thing about this project was that it was funded by the Public Interest Journalism Fund.
And that is interesting in the current climate for NZME as a company, and given recent machinations at board level and about the sort of broad vision of the company and purpose of the company.
Exactly. And so Jim Grennan, who you probably know, has been trying to take over the board of the company, exert control of the board, and it looks like he will be on the board, but not necessarily its chair. Mm-hmm. This is the current situation. But he, in exchanges with the Journalist Union ETU about editorial independence, seemed relatively critical of the Public Interest Journalism Fund. He saw it as, well, isn't your editorial independence already been breached by this fund, which required you to sign up to a particular view of the treaty? This was his claim. He might not have known, I don't know whether he did, that NZME actually got a carve-out in its applications to the PIJF that meant that the NZ On Air, the body that was giving the money, didn't actually have control over their treaty coverage. Nevertheless, Jim Grennan's site that he funds and helped found, The Centrist, it has bemoaned the media only telling what it says is one side of the treaty story. That's an anonymously penned story. There's a few like it. And it's interesting, given that, and given the increasing influence he's probably going to exert in future months, that this Herald project funded by the Public Interest Journalism Fund, foregrounding Māori voices, gets honoured in this way on journalism's biggest night.
That project was headed by the Herald's news editor, Andrew Lax, and what did he have to say on the night?
Well, I'll play a couple of clips from his speech. I thought it was a good speech. It was to the point. It was very direct. It was a news editor's speech. And so this is him talking about a turning point where he realised that Whenua was a special project.
I can still remember, actually, after listening to Narumu Blair tell us the story of Ngāti Whātua and what really happened down at Okahu Bay, and I looked across the room at Julia and we were both trying not to cry, basically, and trying to look staunch and professional.
And Andrew Laxon went on to say something relatively pointed.
We've realised that as New Zealanders, we don't know our own history very well, and the political conversation has sometimes indicated that. And if whenua has in some small way made people realise what our history really is, then it's all been worth it. Thank you very much.
Well done. Congratulations.
Yeah, well, that was the end of Andrew Laxon's speech, obviously, and it will be interesting just how much NZME focuses on that history going forward and whether we get more projects like this one.
And that was not the only award the BIJF had a hand in for NZME.
No, it's young reporter Bonnie Jansen won Best Up-and-Coming Journalist, and she came out of the Tirito Cadetship Scheme, and that was something that NZME started up with the help, again, of the Public Interest Journalism Fund. So it's produced a bunch of good journalists, actually, including Bonnie Jansen and Raphael Franks, who I see a lot on the site, doing a lot of good work. And here's what she had to say in her speech.
I feel super grateful to be up here and receive this. It's a tough time for young people in the industry, but sitting in a room with the talent that is here and the talented people is a reminder of why we've got to push through and stick at it. So thank you so much. I just want to thank Lois Ture for the Tirito Cadetship and trusting me and backing me. Same with Shane Curry, trusting the program.
Yeah, so she credits the Tirito scheme for getting her in the door and into this industry. It was also interesting to hear someone that's at the beginning of their career saying, on a night where they're getting honoured, saying, "Oh, well, this is why we got to stick it out." It sort of felt a little bit. It didn't make me feel great about the prospects of the industry in some ways. So congratulations to her, and I do. I think Tirito will, whether we get sort of schemes like this again is actually going to impact whether we're going to have these young people that are going to be able to persist with the industry and carry on with the industry. And I just don't think a government is ever going to run a scheme like the Public Interest Journalism Fund again after the backlash that it got. But actually there's a whole heap of good stuff that it did, really great projects that came through as a result of it. So it's a celebration of some of that and a reminder that we might not have it again.
There was another notable winner on the night too, Hayden.
That's right, the aforementioned Andrea Vance. She won Political Reporter of the Year. Here she is.
Congratulations to our winner, Andrea Vance, The Post Stuff. Judges said Andrea is a compelling must-read journalist for anyone interested in who is pulling the political levers in New Zealand and why. This will be a good speech.
It's an interesting musical choice there.
Really, really interesting musical choice, eh? Perhaps a pointed musical choice, given the accusations of misogyny that were levelled at Andrea Vance this week. I don't know.
What was her speech like?
Well, it was pretty down the straight up and down, straight down the middle. It did begin with one joke referencing the week, though.
Thank you. You guys are all really worried what I'm going to say, aren't you?
Yes, probably everyone was a little bit worried what she was going to say, but actually she just thanked a bunch of people and got off the stage, and she studiously avoided any C words, any epithets whatsoever, really. She was very intentional about thanking, should be said, Sinead Boucher and Tracy Watkins. Now, Sinead Boucher is the owner of Stuff. Tracy Watkins is the editor of The Post, both of whom said backed her this week. Must have been an absolutely wild week for Andrea Vance.
Yeah.
Spend all week being berated by politicians and then win a huge award at the end of it.
5.5 to 10. Having mentioned a big win for Stuff, you also wanted to talk about what looks like a bit of a divide within the company.
Stuff on Stuff violence, Emil. So on Monday, the Stuff website ran a story headlined "Wellington Hospo bosses insist business not as bad as it seems." That's quite a headline,
title,
sort of spiritually similar to one that NZME ran recently about the Mad Butcher isn't dead and is loving life despite having cancer. This was a story in NZME. Now, it quoted Sean Golding, owner of the bar Golding's Freedive, and he said that I would say that Stuff and The Post have had a big part to play in the negative tone when it comes to the city, and the outcome is that no one comes out, because they are constantly being told that the city is miserable. And as a reminder, that story ran on Stuff. So that was Stuff saying that Stuff has had a real huge hand in making sure that the hospitality businesses are struggling.
So Stuff is running a story which says, in which there is a line saying that Stuff has really hurt Wellington with its negativity about Wellington. Is this partly a product of the split between Stuff, the website, and Stuff's stable of newspapers?
Yes, I wonder here. So just as a bit of context, Stuff split into two separate businesses around December last year, and there's Stuff Digital, which is the website, 3, all of that kind of thing, and then there's Masthead Publishing, which is all of the newspapers, including the Post.
Yeah.
And the reporter who wrote this story works for Stuff Digital, that's Emma Ricketts, and from what I can tell, these arms are increasingly working separately. People are getting hired to mastheads and then they're working for mastheads, and sometimes they're doubling up with the people in digital, and it seems like there's different cultures emerging. And so potentially you have this issue where Stuff Digital is writing a story that criticises something that Stuff Mastheads is sort of doing.
And there is a bit of talk, a bit of whispering, although there has been for some time, that this split could be made permanent.
The reporting is that Trade Me is interested in acquiring Stuff's digital arm, and we know that NZME was in talks to buy the newspapers until quite recently when the aforementioned Jim Grennan made his bid to take over NZME's board, and then it seems that Stuff pulled out of those talks and was a bit discomforted by that development. So
how did the Post take this criticism?
there's a little bit of drama behind this one. So the Post has had a little bit of a antagonistic relationship, you'd have to say, with the current Wellington Mayor Tory Whanau. And she reposted the criticisms of the Post and Stuff on her Blue Sky account. And she said, look, I love this. Wellingtons are tired of being gaslit into thinking their city is crap when it's not. We're in the midst of transformation and regeneration to reflect our diverse community. This is a good thing. And the Post actually replied to that relatively sarcastically with the words, so negative about Hospo, and then with a list of about 7 positive stories that they'd written about hospitality.
Which seems an unusual way for a media outlet to act on social media. Does it? Maybe not.
Is it what they... Yeah, maybe not. You kind of got to credit it because at least they're being real there. They're engaging back and forward. They're not just posting stories or
being
bland corporate speak. It's getting into the thick of things. It's quite odd for the paper to do an antagonistic tweet to a public figure that they have to cover. It is quite snarky and defensive, you'd have to say, and it kind of. It isolates the argument to the issue of just Hospo. Have we reported positively on Hospo?
Right.
When I think that really what Sean Golding and Tory Whanau is talking about is a little bit wider than that.
Yeah.
Is, have you been positive about the city as a whole?
Ending on some positive news for Stuff and for New Zealand more broadly, I would posit one of its well-known former journalists is returning.
Yes, Henry Cook. He's been in London for a couple of years. I think his visa's running out. He can't stay. He's getting kicked out. He's coming back to be the deputy political editor of the Post. He's a bit of a machine. He really pumps out content.
He's great.
He's a really good political
Henry.
reporter.
Yeah.
And so that's a good get for the Post. Big week for the Post, getting Henry back, winning Political Reporter of the Year, being berated in Parliament. Huge.
What do they say? Never pick a fight with someone who buys ink by the barrel. I wonder whether media organisations still do that.
I think that saying is probably out of date now, because now you can buy pixels by the billion.
We need to
I don't know why you can.
We need to come up with a new phrase.
Yeah.
Thank you, Hayden.